Hey guys, Sheldon from the Biz Zone here, bringing you another explanation video, and today we're talking about Altered Carbon Season 1. We're going to be recapping, breaking down, and explaining everything that happened in Season 1. And you kind of have to, because with a show like Altered Carbon that spans over 250 years, and they start using words like needlecast, CTAC, 653, resleeving, etc., it can get pretty confusing. But let's just jump into the show and start breaking it down. We're gonna start off with the first episode, the very beginning of the show, when we're first introduced to Takashi Kovac. Now, if you've seen the series, you know that this is a different sleeve, a different body that Takashi is in, because his previous sleeve isn't this, and the one he takes on later in the form of Joe Kinnaman, aka Stryker, isn't this sleeve. So this sleeve is the sleeve that Takashi takes after everything went down in his past. So let's jump even deeper, further back in his past and talk about Takashi. Takashi is born on the planet called Harlan World, where his sister and his Eastern European father and his Japanese mother, and his father's pretty abusive, and his father murders his mother, and in revenge and for his mother, Takashi ends up killing his dad. Now, because of this act, Takashi is actually chosen by CTAC. CTAC stands for Colonial Tactics Assault Corps. And that's pretty much the military of this new government that's set in the future. And because of his great promise in killing his father, he's actually drafted in there, and they promise to give his sister a better home, and they take him and they train him for about 25 years. And in this time, Takashi's trained to be an elite fighting figure called an envoy. Now, the reason envoys are different from other types of soldiers is because envoys are trained to be weapons. They have intuition, they have special intuitions, which are enhanced senses, deductive skills, and the fact that envoys can jump into different bodies, because in the world of Altered Carbon, we know everyone has a stack that you put in the back of their neck, and that transfers your consciousness from body to body. And with that comes sleeve sickness, and that's when you're put in a new body and you don't quite understand the new body. It's different because your mind is used to your body. Our minds right now, the way it is constructed, is used to our bodies, our fingers. We know how our body feels. But if you were to take my mind and put it in somebody else's body, my mind will have trouble regulating that body. It will take some time to adapt. Now, when it comes to Takashi and the other envoys, they don't need that adaptation period. They can just jump into a body and automatically control it. That's why when they finally awaken Takashi in Stryker's body in the future, he's able to take out those guys who took him out the tube. He's able to knock everyone down and ask for mercy so he can see his body, because he doesn't need time to acclimate, because he is a superior fighting soldier. And that's what makes envoys so dangerous. In this world where they can needlecast is pretty much like cloud sharing, like uploading your consciousness from one body to another remotely. And the fact that they can pretty much jump from body to body, enhanced senses, skilled fighters, deductive reasoning skills, and pretty much they were trained to be the elite of the elite. And that's what envoys excel at. The fact that they can be thrown into any combat situation, deduce the situation, and pretty much come out on top is what makes envoys as great as they are. And that's why Bancroft wants Takashi to solve his murder. But before we get to Bancroft, let's finish going down his timeline, Takashi's timeline, until we get to Bancroft's timeline. So Takashi returns to his planet of Harlan World, and it's in that planet that he meets his sister. The sister that the government was supposed to give a nice home to, is the sister that the government was supposed to actually look out for her. They kind of put her in a foster home. She bounced around until she joined the Yakuza, and essentially became a criminal. So once her and Takashi united, they decided to take out everyone and run away together. And now that brings some complications, because while they're together after 25 or so years, they're also the most wanted criminals in the world. They're wanted by the Yakuza, they're wanted by the government, so pretty much they run to the rainforest, and that's when they meet Kel, or Chris Faulkner, who is the revolutionary leader of the Kalis. And the Kalis are a group of people that she created, not created per se, but a group of people that she teaches her beliefs to, in which is what the show ends up devolving into. Her beliefs is that the longer people stay alive, the rich and powerful are going to use this, and they're going to stay rich forever, and therefore creating a vast disparity in class between the rich and the poor. And we see that in the future timeline. We see that in Bancroft's timeline, where the meths actually live above the clouds and the people live on the ground. Now, meth is short for not methamphetamine, the drug, but meth is short for Methuselah, which is a Bible figure, Noah's grandfather. Noah from the Bible, he's Noah's grandfather, and he's the longest recorded living person in the Bible. That's why they shortened the name to meth, because these guys live hundreds of years. Bancroft has lived over 300 somewhat years, and he's older than Takashi, So that's where the name comes from. So going back to Kel Chris, Kel actually shows the people the error of the ways, and her group are trying to abolish this system before it gets started. They want to make sure that they're going to set up a virus into everyone who has a stack. And the virus does not allow your mind to transfer past 100 years. Once your mind has aged 100 years, you will essentially die. That's her plan. That's her go-to. That's what she wants to establish, and she wants to disrupt the world order. Because as it is now, the world is actually moving towards that path. So she doesn't want it. And we come to find out that Kel isn't just some radical. Kel is actually Nadia Makita. We might not know who that is, but Nadia is the one who created the stacks. So she's the one who created the technology of this future that propels people to live longer. So she essentially saw the error of the technology she's creating, how it could be turned against her original goals, which were traveling the universe and expanding human knowledge. Instead of doing that, the rich just want to live longer. So she saw the potential dangers of that lifestyle, so she wanted to go against it. And with someone like Tekashi on her side, who is a trained envoy from the government, from CTAC, on her side, they kind of have the upper hand in this battle. And before their final stand, which would have been successful, but for some reason, the final battle, the Battle of Stronghold, which was where they were hiding out in Hardenwold, was attacked by the government, and pretty much the entire rebellion was squashed in one day. And that's where the biggest twist of the story comes from. Tekashi's sister, Raylene, betrayed them because Raylene did not want to die with Kel's cause. She wanted her and Tekashi to live forever because that's essentially the only family she has. But we're going to get more into Raylene's plan now that we establish who Tekashi is. Tekashi is the only who barely survives, and he goes on to become this mercenary, and that's when we see him in the very first scene in this new body. And from this new body, we see him collecting stacks. Now these stacks, we don't know what he's collecting them, but we can see that he's washing blood off of them, so it looks as though he's killing people and removing their stacks. Maybe these are important figureheads in the government, we don't know, but all we know is he's a mercenary hell-bent on rebellion and revenge for Kel Chris. We all know how that ends up. Tekashi ends up losing his body and getting sent to prison, where he's there for 250 years. And in this world, when you go to prison, it's not regular prison when you're behind bars and you're winning your sentence. They remove your stack, essentially removing your consciousness, and they put it away in storage until your sentence is up. Now, 250 years later, Tekashi's awoken in this new body. This body which belongs to Elias Stryker, but he doesn't know that yet. All he knows is he's brought back 250 years into the future to solve Lawrence Bancroft's murder. Now, this is the main crux and main plot of the story. Now, this plot line has quite a few threads. Like, this is arguably the most convoluted murder mystery plot line I've seen in TV in a long time. And that's because there's so many different threads that lead back to that night. Now, the mystery itself is pretty simple. Bancroft was murdered, and he wants an envoy, a supreme fighting machine that Tekashi is, to solve this. Now, in order for Tekashi to have the best body available to him, he takes the body of Elias Stryker, who is a fighting machine. His body is perfectly adapted for Kovac's mind because Kovac needs a combat-ready body. That now drags in Ortega into the story, Kristen Ortega, who is the fiance of Stryker. Now, Stryker's mind is in prison, but his body belongs to Tekashi in the meantime. And because that is her lover, she kind of follows him around. That's why she's around the first few episodes. That's why she was there at the police station when he was released, because she wanted to know who had her lover's body. And that's why for the first few episodes, before we get her backstory, she's an annoying character who just happens to pop up everywhere he goes. And she was pretty annoying. But once we understand the backstory behind Elias's body and this connection to Kristen, that makes sense. Now that Bancroft has Tekashi in this body, he sets Tekashi off to solve the murder. Now, I'm going to make this really short. I'm not going to go into every little detail of it, but for the most part, there's three important parts we have to understand with this murder. It ties into Lizzie Elliott's murder, it ties into Mary Lou's murder, and it also ties into Elias Stryker being arrested. Now, these three things are set into motion by Raylene. Raylene, who is Tekashi's sister. In the time that Tekashi thought she was dead, Raylene actually survived because she is the one who betrayed Kel and her rebellion and gave the protectorate or the government the information to where their stronghold was, and that's why they were able to assassinate and squander the rebellion. And because of that, she was essentially given a pardon and money to start her life. And now that Tekashi was arrested and went to jail for 250 years, she amassed a fortune. When I mean a fortune, she became a meth because she created the company Psychosec. And Psychosec is essentially everything wrong with the future. They're the ones behind the Sky Palace, which is essentially a brothel in the sky. They're the ones behind human cloning and bodies. That's why rich people like Bancroft and his wife can keep just jumping into previous bodies of themselves. Even if they die, they can just jump into a clone's body. Her company created that. They also are behind the virtual reality torturing, which is created by her. So pretty much everything wrong and corrupt with the world, everything Kel Chris and Tekashi was fighting against, his sister perpetuated that act, and she amassed her fortune and power, and she became one of the richest and most powerful members of society. But even with all that power, even with all that success, she didn't have the pull or the leverage to get Tekashi's mind out of prison. And that's when she enlists Lawrence Bancroft to get his body out, because Lawrence is that dude. Lawrence was actually born in 2019. If you think about that, that's 1 year from now. So a guy born 1 year from now will be alive in the 25th century in this timeline. And because of his longevity, he has the pull to not only squander Proposition 653, which is another major plot point. Now, 653 essentially is a law that they're trying to pass in which people who are dead can be spun back up or brought back to life in a new body and testify against their murder or whatever crime that was committed to kill them. But because people and religion is still a prominent thing in this timeline, there's neo-Catholics in this timeline. They don't want people to be brought back to life. So those people, the neo-Catholics, have coding in their necks that says that their stack cannot be brought back to life if they die. But Proposition 653 would make it so that even if your religion or whatever it is that you have, if you're murdered, they can bring you back so you can testify against your murder. And now Bancroft was the reason this proposition was slashed, and that's all part of Raylene's plan. And the plan was simple: convince Bancroft to bring back Tekashi, and with Tekashi by her side, she thought she could pretty much have an intergalactic empire with her brother. In order to do that, Bancroft had to be murdered, and this is the murder plot as it happens. This is how Lizzie and Vernon are brought into this. Vernon, as you know, the black guy, his best friend in the future, is brought into this because his daughter Lizzie was killed, and they don't have the money to put her in a new sleeve, and her mind is pretty much fragmented. Her consciousness inside the stack, she pretty much went crazy with the trauma. And we find out that Bancroft used to visit Lizzie, and Lizzie used to work at a brothel. So Bancroft used to go there and have himself a good time with Lizzie. And Lizzie ends up pregnant. And when she goes to reveal this to Bancroft, Bancroft's wife, Miriam, kind of beats her in and kind of kills her. Not kind of, but straight up kills her. And that is what fragments her, because she was pregnant with Bancroft's child, and the trauma and the way that she was brutally murdered by Miriam Bancroft caused her mind to be fragmented, which ties to Bancroft's infidelities. That's how Tekashi was able to link them, and that's why he went to Elliot's house. That's why he went to the Elliots, and that's how he meets Vernon, who is a military guy, who was a former Marine who was tasked with watching his daughter after his wife was arrested for being a dipper. Dipper in this timeline, dipper is another word for hacker in this future. And these hackers, these dippers can dip into your stack, so essentially you can hack into your consciousness remotely. And because that's a crime, she was arrested, and Vernon had to raise Lizzie, and look how she turned out, right? So that's how she fits into that. That's one of the plot points that lead back to the Bancrofts. Now that we have that, Mary Lou Hinchy is another character who is important to the plot because she turns up, essentially she fell out of the sky, and because of Proposition 653, which doesn't allow you to bring people with the religious coding back, she is unable to be brought back. But granted, even though Mary Lou wasn't religious, the fact that Raylene had so much power, she kind of hacked into their stack and put the coding on her stack, even though she wasn't. Because Raylene knew what happened, and the real reason Mary Lou killed herself is because Bancroft, she saw what Bancroft was going to do to her, and she saw what Raylene was going to do to her. So rather than let them kill her, she thought she would just end her life herself, and in doing so, the police would spin her back up, bring her back to life, and get her confession. But she did not know that Raylene implanted the Neo-C coding on her stack, so she was unable to be brought back to life. That's another thread bringing to Bancroft. Now Bancroft, the reason Bancroft was so savage that night that he went and he beat up his son Isaac the same night that Mary Lou killed herself and that he also killed another sex worker in the sky was because he got this male enragement hormone that is used mostly to pretty much give men aggression, right? So they have this aggression hormone. This is kind of drug that gives you passion and releases your inhibitions, and that causes Bancroft to go wild, kills one, and in this moment is when Bancroft feels the most guilty and tries to kill himself. So that's the mystery of Bancroft. Bancroft wasn't murdered. Bancroft killed himself so he could forget the guilt of causing all this death around him. But because Bancroft is so proud and such an old, powerful man, he didn't believe that he would ever stoop so low into killing himself, because by him shooting his sleeve before his memory's backed up, he's unable to actually remember what happened that night and why they got to that way. That's where Tekashi comes in and he kind of links those plot points. So that's pretty much Bancroft's story. Now we pretty much summed up Bancroft's involvement in the story. We can take a look at Raylene in the future. After she built her empire, she got close to Bancroft. The way she was able to get Bancroft drugged and enter her paradise hotel in the sky in the first place to deal with Mary Lou was Lizzie's murder caused Miriam to panic, and Miriam needed to get rid of the body. That's when Ray offered her services. Ray got rid of the body. Now Miriam owed her one, and she cashed that in pretty quick by having Miriam drug Bancroft, having Bancroft commit those acts. And now that Bancroft needed his murder solved, she suggested to bring back Tekashi, the lost envoy. And now Tekashi pretty much solved the mystery of it all and found out that his sister Ray was the traitor this whole time. That is the main story and the main crux of this show. That's the whole triangle. It's Bancroft, Kovacs, and Ray. They're the principal characters who all play different roles in this murder mystery. So now that we have this whole overarching plot of Bancroft's murder, we have Tekashi's life, we have Ray's life. Those are the three pillars that actually hold the show together. And then we can't go on without me speaking about my favorite character, Poe. Poe is the AI hotel named after Edgar Allan Poe. He's an artificial intelligence. He's the hotel he's the AI that runs the hotel. The hotel is him, and he's one of the most prominent figures on the show. And the way he fits into it is by chance. Tekashi just stumbles onto his hotel and he becomes a bigger plot line to it. Now the show has a bunch of twists and turns. We can talk about the double Demis, or Dimitri or Demi, who kind of double sleeved himself. What double sleeving is the fact that he copied his consciousness into another body. So that's not actually his brother. It's actually Demi times 2. So they're both him, just in different bodies. We see Tekashi do this later on in towards the final episode, where he clones himself and the clone gets to go off with Miriam Bancroft and have the time of his life while he stays back and solves Ray's murder. So we have that going on, and that's interesting. And another interesting thing is we have in the Fighter Dome, we see Tekashi's second body that Demi inhabits. Now this body was picked up from his murder site, and with his DNA, the owner of the Fight Club, the Fighter Dome, was able to replicate the body of an envoy to use in combat. And because Demi knew of that body, he transferred there and tried to defeat Tekashi. But it's not just the body, the mind is in there, and the mind of the envoy is greater than the mind of the body of the envoy. So Tekashi in Stryker's body was able to handle Demi in his own body. And then there's the whole ending, which I'm gonna make a video separate for that, explaining the ending, because the ending ties up all these loose plots up in there. The most interesting things I have, and the most interesting theory that I have, is that Ray says that Kel is still alive and she was gonna show Tekashi Kel. But because Tekashi didn't trust her, Tekashi ends up killing her. But the thing is, if Kel is still alive and a backup, and we know Ray has all this money, her mind is probably backed up as well. So in the second season, I expect to see a lot more of Ray, a lot more of Kel, and Tekashi's gonna be a new body. Because if you remember towards the end, Tekashi gave up the body of Stryker to Kristen, and he was able to free Stryker to get his body back. So Tekashi's gonna be a whole different body. In season 2, it's gonna be interesting because in season 2, we're gonna probably have 2 stories going on. Now that we know about Tekashi's past, we're not gonna have as much flashbacks of his past, but we are gonna have a kind of story where we're seeing Tekashi go on his journey. At the same time, we're still following Stryker and Ortega on Bay City, trying to figure out what's going on. And it'll be interesting to see how the Bancrofts go from here. With both Miriam and Lawrence in jail, Isaac is now running Bancroft Industries, and I'm sure he has some bitterness towards Tekashi for having his parents locked up and the fact that his sister was behind it all. There's a lot of interesting things to digest in this season, but hopefully we see more of this in the season, but hopefully next season they expand on this more, because I'm really interested in the world of Altered Carbon. Anyways, guys, if you like this video, definitely hit the thumbs up button, hit the subscribe button if you guys haven't already. Check out some of the other videos on the page, and I'm going to be making another video on the ending and future possibilities of season 2. So be on the lookout for that by hitting subscribe. And until next time, guys, binge on.